Welcome to the Firehouse Roundtable podcast, brought to you by the Ventura Fire Foundation. My name's Peter McKenzie. I'm one of the hosts. I'm a retired fire captain with the City of Ventura Fire Department.
And I'm Jason Kay. I'm an active fire captain also with the Ventura Fire Department.
And we are excited that you are going to spend some time with us at the kitchen table, learning about firehouse issues that we're trying to bring awareness to.
Thanks for joining us as we discuss the issues of being a firefighter, both on and off duty, and how it affects us.
Let's get right to it. All right, welcome to another episode of the Firehouse Roundtable. Got Jason with me. Jason, how are you?
I'm good, Peter. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, real good. Excited
Good.
about our guest coming on, Aaron Foster. I was on their podcast. He actually runs a Facebook group it's called First Responder Financial Freedom. It's a Facebook group, and it's basically exactly what it sounds like. It's firemen and police and military people who, I think it's really heavy focused on the real estate investing side. But I actually went on their podcast as a guest, and yeah, I was impressed with kind of what they were talking about and how they were doing things. And then we invited them onto our podcast. So yeah, looking forward to it. How's your week going?
That's going good. I went to another urban search and rescue class. I was task force leader last week. So that was good. That was a long week of driving into town every day, but it was a good course for me to take. We've had some regular crazy calls. I was just on a car fire last night. But what we're talking about today with Aaron Foster, I'm actually part of his Facebook group. It's interesting to see some of his strategies that he comes up with and to try to employ those for myself. And, the talk around the kitchen table has just changed from when we were brand new firefighters, and you got to get rid of your debt and you got to basically just live very conservatively until you make it to the end, to what happens if you get hurt? What do you do about money? And then also, should you just be relying on your income and your pension? And what does that all mean? And what's your tax rates? And I feel like that stuff was never talked about when we were new.
Yeah, I don't think, not really. I mean, I know that one thing that would have been helpful for me is, and that's like my soapbox issue, is like, you need a plan B. Like if you get hurt, if tragedy strikes and you can't go back to the station, it's a problem, especially if that's all you know how to do. There's a million other ways to do this. And we're obviously going to talk about some real estate investing with Aaron, but that's a really good one for people to do. But yeah, that's good. I think that conversation evolving is a good thing for sure. I know for me, it's really hard to understand why some people decide to take action and why some don't, right? Because I think everybody knows investing in real estate's generally a good idea and, can help your financial future, but so few people actually do it. Like, I would love to get into the psychology behind that. Like, how can we motivate people to take more action? Not that Aaron's going to help us figure that out, but I think that would be, beneficial in general if people just had more of a bias towards action taking. But
yeah, it's just a risk, and it's hard to take a risk when you're in your 20s and you have a huge future ahead of you and you don't really care about retirement. And then all of a sudden you're in your 40s and it matters, and it's too late to be in your 20s again and starting over. So it'll be good. Let's get into it with Aaron, and we'll keep up the conversation.
All right, let's get into it. Aaron, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you with us.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so just for the sake of our listeners who don't know you, why don't you take a couple minutes and kind of give us a quick bio on you?
Sure. So I'll give you the 5,000 foot overview of my life. So became a firefighter after high school, went to college for fire and arson investigation. I did some time with one of the government ABC groups as an internship program. But I did the whole kicking indoors, saving babies, beat your chest, want to be a big city fireman. I got real lucky. I had scored very well on a test. I got hired by the Washington, D.C. Fire Department, where I'm at now. I've been there for going on 20 years. I'm in my 19th year now. And I did a couple of years in Maryland departments before I came over here. So, so that's that's kind of how I got in the fire department. But the reason that sparked my interest was because I used to work at a lock house on the C&O Canal at the river, and I always wanted to do river rescue. In order to do river rescue, you had to join the fire department. So I was like, this is kind of neat. And then I ran to a fire, and I was like, this is the most fun you can have with your clothes on. So kicking in doors, saving babies, breaking windows, and then people thanking you and bringing you cookies later on and telling you how great you did. So it was a great time. Loved it. From there, I got into investing, and that's a long story, but we'll get into that over, the next hour. So what do you guys got?
Yeah, no, awesome. Yeah, welcome to the show. I think what I'm excited to talk about is, obviously you're a firefighter, so we speak that same language, but your expertise on the real estate investing side and what you've kind of built and how you're doing it. And I'm looking forward to you sharing that story so that our listeners can relate to it and go, Aaron's just like us. We can do the same thing he's done, is my goal for the conversation. And obviously there's going to be more nuance to that, but that's kind of where I'm hoping the conversation goes.
Sure. So I'll tell a couple of stories. I'll try not to inflate them too much because, as firefighters love to inflate stories. And I'll tell you about the real estate investing. So typical blue collar kid, grew up in a blue collar neighborhood. You have people from all walks of life in the neighborhood, just outside of Washington, D.C. DC was crack wars during the 70s, 80s, and 90s when I was a kid. So there was a lot of action in the area, and it kind of drew my attention because I thought it was cool. And these guys were, doing the deeds that I wanted to do. So after I got hired, I started investing early. I think I bought my first house when I was about 21 or 22 by University of Maryland. The plan was to keep it as a rental, flip it within 2 years, not pay capital gains, and then go on to the next one. So market crash in 2008, I got held up with holding the property. At the top of the market was worth $389. The bottom of the market, the house across the street from me sold for $110,000. So I bought mine for $253. So there's about $150,000 degree swing at the high, and then $300,000 from that to the low. So I had to change my course of action, and I decided to make it a rental because I was by University of Maryland. I had a lot of connections to the fire department and a lot of the military guys, and the location alone close to Metro. So I decided to rent rooms out. So most guys, when they're 21, 22 years old, they have renters anyways, or they have roommates anyways. So that's what I did. I just made the rooms rentals, and they paid for my mortgage for me. Now, the new days, this is called house hacking. Like, this didn't have a term years ago, where you buy a house, exactly, or you should have a good idea of what rooms will rent for, and if the market will allow you to have room renters. Because obviously, if you're in a rural area, you might not get a high demand for renters. But if you're in a place like DC Metro or LA or New York, most of the major metropolitan areas, there's always a need for affordable housing. So that's what I did. Started getting into that. Market crashed. I got started stacking money and putting money in my bank accounts. And then I was like, what do I do now? Because I can't get approved. Nobody can get approved at this point. During the 2008 period, before pre-2008, everybody can get approved. Your job's your credit. That's what they say on the commercials, right? So you can get 100% financing, and they just look at your bank statements. Seems a lot of the banks would fudge your numbers to make you look even better on paper. And it got you approved for a much bigger, more expensive house than what you could realistically afford. And that was my experience on the East Coast. Now, if we were talking about like nowadays, the reins are a little bit tighter, the noose is a little tighter. They're not going to let you get away with stuff like that. So most companies want you to put 20% down to buy an investment property. But if you are military, you can get a VA loan for 100% financing. If you want to live in a rural area, on the USDA website, there's a map, and it shows the yellow areas as highly populated, and the areas outside of that are more rural. So the areas outside of the populated areas will also get approved for 100% financing. So I used to go to auctions for USDA houses when people couldn't pay their mortgages. They don't advertise on Zillow or Redfin or HotPads or any of the popular websites right now. You can go on there and it'll tell you what the government bid is. And as long as you're the person who shows up and you bid whatever they do, then you get the property. And I had one of my battalion chiefs actually show me that probably 2010-ish, 2009-ish. And it was a great tool to springboard me to the next level. So,
Aaron, let me stop you for a second, because you're going through so much stuff. And I want to get back to what made you why did you buy that first house? What in your thought process said, hey, I just got hired by the fire department, having a great time, I'm going to go buy a rental property?
So it was,
how did that come about?
yeah, so I wanted a house that the owner couldn't kick me out of, or I couldn't get moved, or they couldn't cancel the contract or the lease. I wanted a place where I can call my own, and I knew going into this that when I was a kid, we had a rental property, and when my grandmother passed away, we moved into her house. And I knew that if we have a rental property, the renter pays down the mortgage, so my equity grows as long as the value of the property goes up. So I knew going into it, I had a basic idea of how real estate worked. Now, my dad didn't teach me. Nobody taught me. This is all stuff I figured out myself. And you guys can have conversations around the firehouse table and say, if this guy can figure it out, which I promise you, there's a lot of guys in the job that are a lot smarter than I am. We also have some knuckle draggers who are a lot dumber than I am. But across the board, everybody can figure this out. It's just simply having a conversation of running numbers. So I knew going into this house, market was hot. This is pre-08. If I put $20,000 or $30,000 into it, did all the work myself, I could grow the value of the property. It's called sweat equity. And that's what I did. Like, I wanted to have a property that I could build, have more value, and then turn around and sell it for a profit. Like, that was my goal. I've always been a hammer swinger. So that's kind of how I got into the real estate game. But I had to change the direction because the market crashed. And that's why I got renters.
Yeah. Why didn't you instead go buy a boat, motocross or motorcycle and get into that, or an truck. RV, or why did you a big lifted truck? Like, what's so common when guys get hired is they're like, "Oh, I hit the lottery. I got this great job, and now I'm just going to go rack up all kinds of consumer debt and buy a bunch of toys." And that always used to drive me crazy when I saw people doing that. But clearly you took a different path, which I think is a valuable lesson for, do you see, for most people, do you see that same thing at your department? The guys you got hired with, were they doing similar things to you, or what was your observation?
Yeah, I think it's a worldwide thing. I think once you get out of boot camp or once you graduate from fire academy, you either get a new girlfriend, get a new truck, or get a new motorcycle. And that's that's par for the course. It is what it is. Because nobody teaches a lot of us, especially blue collar guys, this stuff when we're younger. So we don't know what consumer debt is. We don't know how to look at finances. We don't know long-term growth and long-term wealth unless somebody gets in your ear when you're young, which I think is lacking in the industry, not the industry, in the U.S. as a whole. I think it's hard to get in kids' ears. And even if you do, you're a hard-headed kid. Like, you're 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. You're like, I've got the world by the cojones, and I'm going to do whatever I want to, and I'm going to live my life vicarious, or live my life as exciting as I want to. So to answer your question, I actually did have a motorcycle, but I used to work on motorcycles before I got hired by the fire department. And I did have a truck because why not? I mean, that's just what I drove around. The first two cars I ever had when I was a kid, I built. So I know what I'm capable of. Like, I knew I could work with my hands, whether it be on a vehicle or on a house. So we're blue collar guys. Like, let's be honest. Like, if we don't know somebody who can do HVAC, then we can do it ourselves. We can figure it out by watching YouTube. Same thing for framing or laying floor or doing plumbing. Like, if we can't figure it out, we're hands-on. We're a hands-on crew. Like, the fire department are guys who like to work with their hands, and a lot of us are visual learners too. So go watch YouTube. Go figure out. We call it FITFO. Figure it the F out. That's what we do. We just go on calls and we go on. To real estate, we just figure it out. And it's just expanding upon with that and doing it onto an asset or some investment properties.
Yeah. What's funny is I was just having a conversation with Jason not long ago because I left the fire department. I'm no longer there, and Jason's still there. And I equate okay, the skills I had to get hired by the fire department and be a firefighter, those skills they're not all that different from running a business. Like, a lot, like you said, the FITFO, that's the first time I've ever heard that out. Is that a DC fire term or no?
No, it's just the term I heard when I was a kid and always stuck, FITFO.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So there's the skills that I learned in the fire service, and it's all the same in business. None of it's different. You're trying to figure it out. As long as you have you're halfway intelligent, you can kind of look at how things work and figure out how to pull levers to make different things happen. And that's all it is. And it's funny that the way you say it like that, because it's true. I mean, if you can figure out to be a fireman, you can figure out how to, buy a rental property. And if you can do that, you can figure out how to fix it and build some equity in it. And none of this stuff is complicated. I think where actually I'm interested in your opinion. What is the disconnect? Because I think people in the station probably see you and go, "Oh, Aaron, he's killing it. He's successful. He's doing all these things, buying all these properties." But what makes you different than the guy sitting next to you who also is interested in real estate investing? Like, I think everyone in general is like, "Oh yeah, it'd be cool to invest in real estate." But what is the difference between why you took action and the guy sitting next to you doesn't? What's your opinion on that?
Pulling the trigger. That's the only thing. So here's how I equate it, and my comparisons are kind of funny. So the first time you ever are intimate with your significant other, you're excited. It's the first time, a little nervous, a little shy. I mean, it depends on the person. Some people are, balls to the wall, but the first time you take action, it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try. And then it works out and it's like, oh man, that worked. That was good. I like that. Same thing for pulling a trigger. If you're a hunter, if you don't know how to hunt at first, you learn a little bit about it. You go out, have somebody teach you and show you the ropes. And then you pull the trigger and you get your first deer, fowl, turkey, whatever you might hunt. Be like, oh my God, I did it. I'm able to do this. Like, now I can do it again. And it's repetition. It's just the willingness to pull the trigger the first time or jump in bed the first time. So that's the biggest thing. And a lot of guys, so here's my thing. You don't know what you don't know, right? So when I go into something new, like I'm not a trench rescue guy. I'm not a high angle guy. Like, it's just not my jam. I don't know it. Could I learn it? Yeah. Do I have some fantastic teachers on my job in the area that could teach me? 100%. It's just a matter of sitting down with them, talking to them, getting my hands dirty. And if I'm willing to do the work that it takes to become certified and something like that. Same thing for real estate. Like, you have to know your numbers. So we can go into numbers now or later if you want to, and just kind of a broad overview of how to look at properties.
Let me get you back to your story a little bit, because you were right where I started to get interested, and Peter derailed you to talk about some other stuff. So you were saying that you bought your first house. You kind of were one of the OGs of house hacking, which we've heard on the show before, that guys were house hacking way before Bigger Pockets called it house hacking, right? So you were doing that.
Yep.
I bought my first house in 2003 with the intent of living in here for 5 years and moving. And that didn't work out so good with what the market did. So you were kind of in that same range, and you were talking about how to get the down payment for your next house, or how you wouldn't need one. And I think that, to go back to kind of what Peter was asking just now, is why a lot of guys stop from having a rental, is that 20% you need down, or the fear of, where do I get 20%, especially in California, when 20% is like sometimes 150 grand. So go into how you got your second rental and how you got money to go from there, if you would.
Before we go into the second rental, there's a different path of real estate investing that I took. And I took it for a very specific reason. So anybody listening, there's tax lien and tax deed auctions. Every state and every jurisdiction has them. Some might be local, some might be shipped out to an online website, but that's what I got into afterwards, because it's a lower barrier of entry. So if I don't pay my taxes on my property, right, those taxes then go to the jurisdiction I live in. That jurisdiction then auctions them off, usually once a year, once every 2 years, and the highest bidder can buy the taxes and then foreclose on my property. And I'll give you an example to make it a little more clear, because it's hard to kind of paint a picture. There was a property on Accokeek Road. They were delinquent their taxes. During 2008, a lot of people were, because they couldn't afford it because the market was crashing. So the bank owned the house with some land and the land next to it. The bank paid off the taxes on the house that was vacant, and they did not pay the taxes on the land. So the land went to the foreclosure auction, or the tax lien auction. I bought it for, round numbers, we'll say $1,500, which is realistic. Then I hired a lawyer after 4 months to start the foreclosure process. Within 2 years, the foreclosure went through. The judge dropped the gavel and said, the property is now yours. So I had to pay the taxes up front that was back owed from the previous owner. The 2 years that was in the foreclosure process with the lawyer, I had to pay the lawyer fees. So I'm all into this property for right around $9,000. I turned around on Craigslist, and I'm dating myself with this. I turned around on Craigslist and sold it within 48 hours for $28,000. So I made, a $12,000 profit on this deal. Now, the money was stagnant because I couldn't pull it out. Once you're into this, you're into this. You can't sell these liens. It's in your name, and that's what I did. I did dozens and dozens of these. Most 99% of liens are paid off by the owner or the bank. I just happened to get one that fell through the cracks because they didn't see value in land during that time period. Now, every state's different. So Maryland is a tax lien state. Once I buy the lien at auction, then I can foreclose on the property. There's other states like, we'll say Pennsylvania, they're tax deed state. So when the taxes are back owed, you can buy the deed at auction. Now, with the deed, there are other liens on the property. It could be a HOA lien, a water lien, a contractor's lien, taxes lien. It could be a number of things. So after that first flip, because the market margins were so tight and I couldn't get approved for money because I'm a kid, the next thing I did was the tax liens. But before we go on, do you guys want to touch on that at all?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So the tax liens, the tax deeds, like right now, to expand upon this, if you were trying to buy a house off market, you need to find people who have a pain. What's the reason they're selling, right? Is it divorce? Because Lord knows 70 to 80% of firefighters get divorced nowadays, same as cops. Is it probate? Do we have a death in the family? Did grandpa die and leave the house to us? Are we facing a financial hardship? Do we lose our job because of some dumb government move? There's a number of reasons that people have pain points. One of them is delinquent in taxes. So once you sign up to look at these taxes on this database, now you have a list of people with a pain point. You can market to them and say, hey, notice that you didn't pay your taxes. Here's a heads up. It's a nicety from me to you to help you out. Or you can say, hey, I see you're in a tough spot. Can I make an offer on your property? I happen to look it up and see that you bought it for X, Y, and Z. This is what I'm willing to pay you for it. And then you don't have to worry about these back out debts that you might have. It's just one of the many lists that you can market to buy properties off market.
Do you still use this strategy today?
Not as much. So I do 1 to 5 houses a year, and I've done it for years. Now, have I done more? Yes. Have I done less? Yes. It just depends on the year. I'm very, very, very conservative in my numbers. I look at worst case scenario across the board. I'm not the kind of guy who's going to do 30 or 40 deals a year. My bandwidth and my capacity are limited. I also own a woodworking company. I've got a lot of hobbies. I've traveled around the world. I've driven cross country in probably a dozen and a half countries. So to me, it's more of a means to an end thing. I enjoy doing it. I enjoy swinging a hammer. I enjoy carpentry. I enjoy woodwork. But sometimes the headache is the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
And these are all flips that you're doing now?
No. So in 2008, I didn't know better. Everything was a flip. But when you do, the capital gains rates have changed over the years. So in 2008, 2009, capital gains rates were 40%, give or take, short-term capital gains. And I think at the time it was you have to hold it for 24 months and a day to get long-term capital gains. So here's the difference. Short-term capital gains right now is about 40%. So if I make $100,000 on a flip, then Uncle Sam's going to come in and take $40,000 of it. So $60,000 goes in my pocket, $40,000 goes into Uncle Sam. I hate paying that tax. I hate giving Uncle Sam money for something that he had no part of and didn't help me grow and didn't teach me about. So that's a thorn in my side. Now, long-term capital gains is a little bit different. So if I hold a property for a year and a day, 366 days, now it's now it's long-term capital gains. And that's closer to your earned income rate. So round numbers, we'll say 20%. So at the end of the year, if I make $100,000 on a house, a year and a day, the following year after that, I'll be paying $20,000 in those capital gains. Are there ways around it? Yes. Now, I'm not going to go deep into the weeds with trust just because I don't know enough to teach about it. I just don't know enough to have a conversation. But 1031 exchanges are a way to defer income from a property. So I'm doing one right now. To be transparent with numbers, if you guys want me to go over the most recent flip, I can do it. There's one in Laurel, Maryland. It's in PG County in Maryland. I bought it from a wholesaler for $179,000. I put right around $22,000 into it, and I sold it for $350,000. within 2 days. Well, a month to renovate it. Sold within 24 hours to the original purchaser. Signed contract within 48 to 72 hours, and then closed 30 days later. So the profit margin on that is about $80,000, right? So short term is only a month and a half, 2 months. Uncle Sam would take right around $32,000, $34,000 from me, or I do a 1031. So I give the money to an intermediary. He holds the money for me. I go find a property within 1 to 3 properties within 45 days. There's a couple other stipulations. And then I take all the money from the gains of that property that I sold and put it into the new project, the new property. So all the gains, short or long term, will now be wrapped into the next property. And until I sell that property, they can't realize or take the capital gains from me until I sell that final property. So long-term strategy, this is the long-term play, is I wrap it into the next property, which I'm looking at rentals. And then in 10 years, when I'm ready to sell it or flip into the next one, I do a 1031 into the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. And you keep trying to grow your portfolio that way. The way you get your money out, so like I told you, I had $20,000 invested into this deal. The way I get my money out is a cash out refi. So cash out refi is a non-taxable event, whereas selling is a taxable event. So it's a way. So the next one we'll say the next one I buy is $350,000 because I looked at one today. It was $350,000. So once I buy it, and I have closing cost expenses and refinance expenses and all that. But say I do flip it into the next one, and I do a cash out refi. I can pull out 20%. I can pull out 80%. To keep my 20% margins in there. So it just depends on how much I want to pull out. And when I do pull that money out, what is my new number going to look like for my monthly holding? It's my PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And will a renter cover those with cash flow? And that's the hard thing I'm having right now. Hard part I'm having right now is because a lot of markets around the country don't have a whole lot of stock or houses available. So a lot of the houses don't make sense for me to buy because they won't cash flow for the next deal. So that's...
Let's talk about a couple of things. One, what does how long have you been doing this strategy of flip 1031 and then just keep rolling it down, keep reinvesting everything? How long have you been at that, and what does your portfolio look like, if you're comfortable talking about that?
I hold on average, we'll say 10 to 12 properties, maybe 15, maybe 8, but on average, we'll say 10 to 12. I don't like going more than that because my bandwidth and my capacity is a little overextended. I have properties across Maryland. I've done not Delaware. I'm looking in Delaware right now. I've done DC. I've done West Virginia. I've done Maryland. I've done 3 hours east, 3 hours west, 2 hours south. All for different reasons. So, and
what is your goal? What are you mentioned cash flow, and it sounds like cash flow is an important component of your strategy. What are you trying to get out of these properties? Is it replacing income? What's your goal with them?
So let's step back, and I'll tell you why I started getting heavier into real estate, why I started doing more and started focusing more on real estate. So a couple of years ago, there was a family in DC that was tortured and murdered over the course of 48 hours. The guy ended up killing mom, dad, the 10-year-old son, and the nanny. In that fire, he poured gasoline on the kid on the floor, and it burned the floor away. And I rolled my ankle. So like most firefighters, you roll your ankle, you pop up, you're like, is it okay? Moved around a little bit. Okay, I'm fine. So I kept working. Later on, we were racking hose. I went to throw hose in the hose bed, and it felt like somebody shot me in my ankle. Everything ruptured. So I hit the ground, and I was like, what in sweet baby Jesus just happened to me? So the sergeant, who's a friend of mine, came out. He's like, dude, what happened? And I was like, I don't know, man. Like, something's wrong. My ankle has a softball inside of it. So the fire department, I had to go see what we call the PFC, Police and Fire Clinic. When I went there, they're like, it looks like you sprained your ankle. I was like, I don't think this is a sprained ankle. I think it's something worse. So for the better part of 9 months, they put me in physical therapy. They finally sent me for a MRI and a scan, probably around month 6 or 7. And the results were supposed to go back to the PFC, and they were supposed to come up with the results. They didn't. So the results I took to my physical therapist because she asked to see them, and I showed it to her, and she was like, everything looks fine. You look like there's nothing wrong. Like it's just a bad sprain. And I was like, I'm getting soft and weak in my old age. Good Lord, I cannot somebody take my man card. This is just a sprain that wouldn't heal. And then a month later, I had my follow up with the PFC, the Police and Fire Clinic. And the doctor was like, nobody called you? I said, no. Oh, let me take a step back. When she read the results, she was like, we're going to increase the physical therapy. So jumping rope on one foot, hopping up and down steps, dancing on a Bosu ball with one ankle, blah, 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 blah. So a month later, I went back to the PFC and she was like, how's your foot feel? And I was like, it feels terrible. Like I feel like I can't press the accelerator without pain in a car. Like it hurts. She's like, did anybody call you? I said, no, why? She's like, oh, you got your results back. She goes, you ruptured every single ligament in your ankle. You have avulsion fractures. You have some chip bone in there. You have some torn cartilage. And I told her, I was like, the physical therapist told me there's nothing wrong with me. So at month 12, they serve you your papers for retirement in DC. And I ran the numbers and it looked like I was going to take home somewhere around $18,000. And I can tell you being poor is extremely scary. And that's probably the biggest motivator I have in my own life is I don't want to be poor. It scares the shit out of me. It's not because I'm wealthy. It's not because I have an expectation of quality of life. It's because your life is harder when you're poor. And anybody listening to this, when we run our calls in the poor areas, their life is significantly harder than ours are. Ours is more than likely. So give them just a shred of dignity, a decency, and help because they might be going through stuff that we have no grasp of. So, yeah. So then I was like, what am I going to do? So that's what I did. I started investing in real estate. I was like, I know how to do real estate. It makes sense. Let me start focusing some attention and energy into other types of real estate. So I was very, very conservative. Again, I'm scared to be poor, so I don't want to make a bad mistake where I lose $100,000 or $200,000 because the DC market and the DC area market is extremely expensive, just like, out in California and New York and Boston and, the big metropolitan cities. So that's what I did. And I started focusing on real estate more. And I was like, how do I make this work? And I started hitting Bigger Pockets, which everybody knows is the website where you kind of learn a lot of this stuff. It's when Josh Dorkin started really ramping up Bigger Pockets. So like you could have conversations with some of these guys that were more the bigger names on there. And I was like, what am I missing? I don't know what I don't know. Like, what else should I be doing? And that's when I started learning about the 1031s and the flipping and the wholesaling and the buy and hold. The buy and hold and anything else that like would be valuable in my career field. And I made friends. There's other guys out there who are doing it. Some of the guys want to talk to you. Some guys don't. Some guys, as we call gatekeeping, they don't want to give you the information on how to succeed. There's guys in Baltimore that I'm really good friends with. They're both Baltimore City firefighters that just retired, and now they're doing real estate full time. They're in the same boat as me. It was like, I want to get in a better position in my life. I actually just gave them a big chunk of money to do a syndication deal, and the syndication is something completely different that I'm learning about now because we take a bunch of our friends' monies and we put it into a deal. We make money off the deal and then we disperse payments. So stuff like that is just, unless you know somebody who's doing it, you'll never hear about it or learn it, which is why I like doing these podcasts because this is how we teach.
Yeah. So you almost had a career-ending injury. You went, oh, this is a problem. I need to make sure I have like a plan B or some alternate source of income. So then you went, I'm going all in on real estate investing. Was there more clarity than that? Like, did you have a number? Okay, I need to replace, I want $50,000 in income from real estate investing by this date? Or was it just, I'm going to do this and let's see how it all plays out?
No, I had numbers in mind. Like, so when we look at calculations for real estate, right, we know what our PITI is, right? Your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Once you have that figured out for each property, then you figure out what it can rent for. That's your spread, right? That's your net spread. So we'll use round numbers. So you'll buy a house, right? And the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance is $1,000. I know that house will rent in the market for $1,250. So I get $250 a month profit on that. Is that worth it to me to put up with the renter in that location? In a C-class, D-class neighborhood, or are you in a B-class neighborhood where you might be able to get a better quality of tenant? So I try to stay in the B, high C-class neighborhoods. And my minimum number is $400 net per month profit on a property. And the reason is because I know, being in the trades, $400 a month is $4,800 a year. I can, with 2 years of rental, I can pretty much replace a roof, HVAC, windows, floors, whatever gets messed up in those 2 years, then I know I'm covered. And when I renovate a property, I try to renovate it so they don't get the tenant calls within the 2-year period. Does it happen? Yeah. Like, do people clog the toilets? Yeah. Do they not know how to turn a light bulb? Unfortunately, yes. We're at a 2023. People don't know how to change a light bulb. But yeah, there's stuff like that where that's what my projections are. Now, the more output though, like if I'm buying $1 million house, I don't want $400 a month. That's not enough for me. So you have to figure out what you're comfortable with your projections of income per property. Some guys are like $50 a door and I own, 100 doors. I'm like, bro, that's not enough. Something goes wrong, you're screwed.
So tell me, let's talk about this. So we obviously DC, really expensive market, where we're at, really expensive. It's really hard. Cash flow is getting more and more elusive as prices ran up and post COVID. Cash flow isn't all like, what's your opinion on cash flow? Because, in my own investments, I don't necessarily have a cash flow problem. Like if I was trying to replace my income and I was willing to eat top ramen and mac and cheese, and cash flow would be really important, right? Like that would be the difference between maybe me paying my rent and a car payment. But if you're someone who doesn't have a cash crunch in your life where you need every dollar of income that you're earning, there's an inverse relationship to what you're willing to invest in. Like, does it make more sense for you to invest in a property that is going to have a higher likelihood of appreciation, and then you're also reaping some tax benefits from it, but you're giving up cash flow? Like, what's your relationship with that kind of dilemma? Because it's hard to chase cash flow if you're going to invest locally where we're at.
Yeah,
maybe where you're at, it's possible, but here it's really difficult.
That's a really good point. So to your point and to emphasize your point, you invest for 3 reasons. You invest for cash flow, appreciation, or depreciation. So anybody listening, cash flow is obviously the spread that you make every single month having a rental property or whatever you might be renting out. Appreciation is where we have a asset in a location where the values are going up significantly and usually fast. So I think the average appreciation rate is between 2 and 3%. During COVID time in the last couple of years, that was exponentially higher, which is a rarity. But we'll say 2% a year is what you can bank on when you look at properties. Now, the depreciation is more of a rich man's game. And that's where I need to have an asset that I take a loss on to write off against taxes. So back to not owing Uncle Sam, that's why you play the depreciation game. Now, depreciation, when you look at a property, you have the land value and you have the property value. Take the property value, divide it by 27.5, and that's what you can write off every single year. So that's what the IRS says. 27 and a half years is what you can write off a property. Just to make it a little more confusing, when Trump was in office, he passed the bonus depreciation. So there is step up or bonus depreciation available in 2016, and then it's getting phased out where you can recapture your depreciation sooner rather than later. That's a more convoluted strategy. But yeah, appreciation, depreciation, and cash flow. So for me, if I'm going to be in the B high C neighborhoods, then I know it's going to appreciate probably at a rate of 2%, maybe 3%. If I'm in the D neighborhoods, then it's usually a war zone. It's where we run our stabbings and our shootings and our domestics all day long, car fires, stuff like that, dumpster fires. So those areas are not going to appreciate in value. So you have to depend on the cash flow for that asset to make sense. Now, do guys do that? Yeah, 100%. Like I keep beating up on Baltimore, so I'll beat up on Detroit for this one. When you buy in Detroit, you know that townhouse or that house is probably not going to go up in value. It's probably going to decline in value. But you know that people are willing to spend a higher dollar to rent it than it's going to cost you to buy it. And you recover your investment costs, which are your down payments, whether it be 3.5% or 20% or whatever it might be, through your cash flow. But calculate it out. If you sell a house, if you buy a house, you're going to pay closing costs and transfer and title. So I use the ballpark 8%. So if I buy a $100,000 house, I'm actually buying it for $108,000. If I sell that same house in a couple of years from now for $200,000, I lose 8%, 6% of realtors, 2% transfer and title. So now I'm losing 16,000. So I'm actually going to walk away with $182,000 minus what I had into it, $108,000. That leaves me a spread of $74,000. So everything that you do in between the time that you buy and sell has to overtake that financial hit through cash flow. So for me, I won't buy anything that doesn't have cash flow. It doesn't make sense. Appreciation, I want appreciation, but I don't depend on it. And depreciation, yes, I'm playing that game to buy things where I know I can depreciate it versus my income. And it's very important that you understand this, because you never want to buy a very high dollar house, get a very low income cash flow from it, and then never be able to overcome the depreciation aspect of it. So you can't write off against your taxes because it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I know that in our area, or just from my personal experience at our little department, guys don't sometimes want to buy a house because the house is, it's like $900,000 for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in our town. And they see that $7,000-8,000 mortgage payment or whatever it is, and they get scared and they go, forget it. I'm never going to buy. I'm just going to rent. But in the meantime, they're getting hammered on their taxes. And I make the argument, you need to look at it more globally. It's just not about how much more you're going to pay for your mortgage versus what you're paying for rent. It's how much money you're going to save on. And that's just as an owner occupied. This has nothing to do with real estate investing, for renting. But some guys have a hard time wrapping their head around that. And in fact, we did an exercise here at the office with our team, because I'm trying to promote home ownership and investing just amongst our team, is people don't understand how much money they pay in taxes, because they get their paycheck, they see the deductions, and they just leave it at that. But when you throw it up on a whiteboard and go, okay, you made $100,000 last year, your payroll deductions were $15,000, but then you also paid this much in sales tax, this much in whatever other taxes there are in our area. And then you ask them, so how did that feel giving $45,000 to Uncle Sam?
Yeah.
And when you quantify it like that and they go, oh yeah, I would not want to write a $45,000 check to the government. Then you can start showing them, well, here's how you lessen your tax obligations. And in my mind, it's not always about cash flow, because guess what? You pay less in taxes, you have higher cash flow.
Yeah. I love the fact
just as a result.
I love the fact that you brought that up, because most people in general don't realize how much they pay in taxes. And I don't know if you guys had this conversation at the firehouse, but we do. It's when you retire, what state are you going to? What are they going to tax your pension at? What's your sales tax? What's your property tax? Because all those are big, big chunks of numbers. Yeah. I think Hawaii is the number one lowest property taxes in the country, but the cost of living is some of the highest in the country. Same thing for Washington, D.C., one of the lowest for property taxes, but to get into a efficiency of 351 square feet, it's going to cost you about $300,000. We broke that $1,000 per square foot mark a couple of years ago. And I'm like, I don't understand how people afford to live here. You got sales tax, you got excise tax, I went out the other day, we were out of town. There was food tax, entertainment tax, and something else tax. I was like, why are there like 4 different taxes on this bill? And it's because they're taxing all your sins, I guess. But that's things. I love the fact that you brought that up, because a lot of people never think about that. And it's a good point to hammer home to guys is, you guys live in California, your property taxes and your taxes are sky high. If you took the same amount of money and put you in Poughkeepsie, Idaho, like in the middle of nowhere somewhere, like would your money go further? Yes, because you have more in your pocket versus Uncle Sam in your pocket. And that's the thing, you have to figure out ways to diminish your taxable exposure.
Hey, this is Joe Booth from the Ventura Fire Foundation. To learn more about the foundation and our programs, visit our website at www.venturafirefoundation.org. 100% of our funding comes from generous donors. And if you like what we're doing, I encourage you to become a donor. It's very easy. Just go to our website, again that's venturafirefoundation.org, and click the red donate button at the top. Whether it's $5 or $5,000, every donation helps ensure local firefighters thrive.
let's do strategy. Like when guys, you mentioned a couple of times that guys are that 20% down scares them. And I agree. Like we're in the same boat. I'm looking at a property right now. It's $600,000. So whatever 20% of $600,000 is the down payment plus closing plus renovation. After repair value of this property is between $1 and $1.2 million. Does that number scare me? 100%. I started the DC Fire Department making right around $35,000 a year. So when we're talking about $1 million, that's a big, big number. But how do I hedge my potential risk against losses in this property? I can get quotes before I buy the property. I can have good general contractors, not the fly-by-night ones, come out and give me estimates of, at face value, what will this cost me? This one is 5,300 square feet above ground. It's got a pool. It's got like this rock waterfall. It's got everything that I'll probably never live in a house like this. I'll flip it all day long, but it's just not where I want to live at. So what's the strategy to get into it? How do I buy it? So I can call it my primary residence. So there's still loans out there right now where you can put 3.5% down. If this wasn't a house that was too beat up, you can put 3.5% down instead of the 20%. Say you're moving and making this your primary. You can get a 203K loan, which is a rehab loan. It's under FHA guidelines where you get that same contractor. You come out there and you have line items. I need the drywall fixed. I need the exterior roof fixed. I need the gutters fixed. I need the railings fixed. Everything to make it FHA approved. And the bank will then loan you the money it takes to buy the house and the money it takes to fix it up. The downfall, the con of that is that you're paying a higher interest rate usually because they're taking more risk getting you into this house. Or you can get hard money lenders. So hard money in this area right now is right around 12% and 2 points. So 12% scares everybody. Like those are 1980s percentages. So if you're doing a 12% loan and 2 points, we'll do the 12% first. You're only into this property for say 3 or 4 months. So the 12% is not a long-term number. It's a short-term number. So you can calculate it out. You know exactly what your PITI is going to be going into this to gentrify the property and make it nicer. And then you're going to refinance out of it once it's appraised higher and then put the money back in your pocket if you want to or get a better interest rate. Now, the 2 points is where a lot of people get caught up. So you can, when you have a point is a percentage. So round numbers again, $100,000. 2 points is 2%. 2% of $100,000 is $2,000. So for every $100,000, you're expecting to spend $2,000. So on $1 million property, it's $20,000. So those are big chunks of numbers you have to take into account when you're closing on the property as well. But if you don't want to do any of those routes, you can do not just beg, borrow, and steal, but you can do HELOCs. So HELOC is a home equity line of credit. Say, round numbers, my house is worth $100,000. A HELOC, some banks will give you 80% of the appraised value. Now, say I owe $50,000 on my mortgage. The difference of the $80,000 and the $50,000 is $30,000, which is what they'll give you for a HELOC. So I've got multiple HELOCs on a bunch of my rental properties, and they're little piggy banks. And I know what my percentage rates are. They're anywhere from 4.5% to 9%. So I can pull from these little piggy banks. I can go make cash offers on properties. And the more piggy banks you have, the more opportunities you have to buy bigger and better properties, and then refinance out into a long-term 30-year mortgage or 20-year mortgage, whatever you want to do. I know some guys they only do 5-in-1 ARMs. So 5 years, one fixed rate for those 5 years, and they figure they'll cash out, refi, or sell within those 5 years. I had one battalion chief, rest his soul, Alan Skursky. He helped me a lot with real estate. He would move into a new primary residence every year, and then after that year was up, he would sell it. Today's government rules are if I'm married, we can write off $500,000. They wouldn't tax us. If you're a single firefighter and you do this is my primary residence for 1 year, you make $250,000. They don't tax that $250,000. So that's another strategy you can use.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think what's important to note here is if any of our firefighter listeners' heads are spinning with all these acronyms and strategies you're talking about, is a couple things. One, none of this stuff is complicated. It may sound complicated if this is the first time you're hearing it, but these strategies really aren't complicated at all. What I think is important for people if they are interested in this type of thing is that they get involved in a community that this is their second language. Like I know, Aaron, you run the First Responder Financial Freedom Facebook group, which is a bunch of firemen who are interested in real estate who talk about this stuff and probably, nerd out about it all the time. Like the point I'm trying to make is it's not hard. It sounds complicated but it's not. And you just have to put yourself in the room with people who are doing it. And there's really not much more to it than that, because then it's just muscle memory and getting off your butt and doing it, right? Like, because it's not difficult to buy a rental property. You might have to come up with some money. You might have to get creative, but it's doable. And even if you don't have money, there's ways to get money. But you have to be rubbing shoulders and elbows with people who know how to do it, who can just show you the way, which I think is what's so awesome about what you guys put together with that Facebook group is you're taking people who typically aren't experts in this area and you're teaching them how to do it. And I think that's awesome. But yeah, what advice, I kind of brought this up a little earlier and you kind of just said, just do it or something along those lines. But I want to go back to that. How do you motivate people to take action to, increase their chance of financial freedom, i.e. firemen at the stations who know it's a good idea, but just can't seem to get off their butt and do something about it? Like, that's the challenge that I see is like motivating people like that. Cause like we said, it's not rocket science, and clearly it works over time because there's example of people who've done it. So what do you say to those people?
I mean, like they say, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So it's a calculated risk that you take to make your future better. But what I try to show guys is, and to your point with the taxes, is I sit down and I'm like, do you have a budget? And I think probably 90% of people in the country don't have budgets. They don't know how much money is coming in, how much money is going out, where the money is going to. So number one would be create a budget, because they can see exactly how much do I have coming in, how much am I actually saving, and what's my future expenses. If my water heater breaks, what am I going to do? If my roof has a leak, what am I going to do? If you show them like, here's your ability to make, we'll use a $400 number, $4,800 a year on a rental income, that's going to cover your water heater. That's going to cover your roof. That's going to cover whatever might happen that you need to replace. Budget's number one. I think most people just don't do a good job of budgeting or know how to. And there's a ton of budgeting tools out there that are either automated that hook up to your accounts, or spreadsheets. I build my own spreadsheet. I was just talking to a buddy of mine who's a lieutenant commander, retired now. We build our own spreadsheets because we have very unique line items. Like my dogs alone cost me something like $3,800 a year. I've got 2 giant Irish Wolfhounds. So on food, insurance, and the couches that my dogs ate, I spent like $3,800. But I know that going into that's a huge number as a line item expense for the year. And most people don't want to do it because either they want to be ignorant, or they're too lazy, or don't know how. So again, it goes back to action taking and being the first one to pull the trigger. Is once you do it and you start getting comfortable with it, it's like, okay, I can do this. And I can promise you, if a knuckle dragger like me can do it, then anybody who's listening can do this. It's just figuring out what you don't know, and then be willing to accept help and ask for help. And Lord knows we're not good about that because we're fixers. Our job is to fix. So we don't like asking for help. So drop the ego and put yourself in a better position in the future.
Yeah, I think it's having a bias towards taking action. Like, even if you take the wrong action, it's okay. It's better than not doing anything. Like, you're going to make mistakes. You're probably going to lose some money along the way, but that's better than doing absolutely nothing. My big shtick lately, and I'm trying to roll something out with our management company, is house hacking, because I can show someone in our area with our house prices and the rents that you can get for a room, how you can basically live in an $800,000 house, for less than $1,500 a month when you house hack it. You're not going to cash flow because that's not happening in our area at the, getting in with a limited down payment, but it's better. It's cheaper than you going to rent a 1-bedroom apartment. And you have an $800,000 house that has tax benefits and it appreciates and all these other things. But I think I've boiled it down to, no, I am going to walk somebody through step by step exactly how it works and show them how they can do it just as much as, some financial expert who's a real estate investing whiz. So, but yeah, interested in your opinion. Jason, what do you got to say? I know you're dabbling in real estate investing and you kind of got started late in the game. And like, what's your take on all this stuff?
Yeah. One of the things you told me a couple of years ago is just do something. And I think that was huge for me because I still hear guys at work all the time go, oh yeah, the plan I had 5 years ago would have worked really well. And I didn't do anything. So here we are in the exact same spot today, and they're still today not doing anything. Then to Aaron's point, the conversations around the kitchen table at the firehouse are new from when I was, 20 years ago when I got hired, and they are talking about taxes now, and they are talking about debt not being such a terrible thing to have, which is, our parents' generation, that was like the bane of their existence, right? How dare you have debt? You got to pay all that stuff off. And now the new conversation is when you do retire, what are you going to be taxed at if you don't have any debt with your pension? And so that's huge too. But yeah, I mean, all this knowledge, it's all, I'd say I'm about 50% on what you guys are talking about, but I'm sure I have the resources to get the answers when I'm ready to take the next step. There is some stuff that Aaron's talking about that I go, it'd be nice to cash flow. Even at 20% down, it'd be nice to cash flow. That ain't happening out here right now anyway. But you don't have to buy out here.
Would you guys ever do long distance investing somewhere else?
Yeah. So that's how I did the majority of my investing, and I'm done with it. So like I'm in a spot now though that I have the luxury of having the network and the deal flow and all the stuff here in my backyard. But I didn't when I got hired by the fire department and everybody was buying monster trucks, I literally was buying duplexes in Indianapolis and Nashville and all these places. And that's what allowed me to get where I'm at today, right? Like I've owned the real estate for a long period of time. It's appreciated all the benefits. And now I'm in a spot where I can make investing work here. It's just different strategies. To make a deal work here, you need more money because I can take a single family house in our area and almost make it meet the 1% rule. But to do that, I have to convert it to a triplex using ADUs and all these other things, and it's going to cost me $250,000 to do. So me as a brand new fireman, that was not in the cards. I shouldn't say that. It wasn't in the cards for where I was at the time. If I took my head and put it on me as a 21-year-old fireman, it'd be totally different, right? But I didn't have that knowledge back then.
Didn't know what you didn't know.
And I didn't think, yeah, exactly. So now it's a different game. And which is one of the reasons we do this podcast is we don't need to learn the mistakes the hard way. Like we need to be able to take people's stories and learn from them. And this is a perfect example.
Speaking of long distance investing, when you guys were talking about the depreciation out where we are, with taxes being what they are, you can invest into a state that doesn't have that property tax, and you can what's the word I'm looking for? Depreciate against your W-2 income from the fire department if you do stuff like that. So there's other strategies out there. I would say if people are listening going, I'd like to do something like that, there's a lot of resources too.
The ADU thing, I think it's an untapped strategy. Accessory dwelling unit is what it stands for. There's a former firefighter. His name's Derek Sherrill, is a friend of mine. He's up in the Seattle area. And that's what he does is he's that ADUguy.com. He's big on bigger properties.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So Derek's a buddy of mine, and that's all he does is ADUs. And he's got a plan. I think he's got 2 plans that he does rinses and repeats. And his thing is I'll buy a house and then we'll have the expectation of converting or adding an ADU on it to increase the value and create affordable housing. So Annapolis is 20, 30 minutes away from me where the Naval Academy is. They just approved ADUs to be built in the back of the properties. But there are stipulations. Like it can't be more than 800 square feet, and it can't be more than half of the house's square foot plan or something like that. So I mean, there's definitely stipulations. But again, I mean, earlier today I had a conversation with the town council, or town manager. Sorry, words are hard. The town manager in Delaware, and he said that I want to convert a bank into a residential space, and he was like, he personally wants it to be like a coffee shop and a donut shop. I'm like, it's never going to work that way. They'll never be able to make enough money with coffee and donuts to afford that building, but that's what they want. So they're stuck in this what I want mentality. And it's like, you're just going to sit there with a vacant property for the next couple of years until you guys have foresight. So be a little creative in your deals. I like creative deals. I've had churches under contract. I've had schoolhouses under contract. I've done a little bit of everything. You get creative, like Peter was saying. You get creative, and you can make a lot of money once you can figure stuff out.
Yeah. Aaron, this has been great. If our listeners want to keep tabs on you, see what you're up to, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can friend me on Facebook. I can tell you right now that the majority of stuff I post on my personal page is absolute garbage. It's just poking and having fun. But if you want to join the First Responder Financial Freedom, I actually show some of my education in there, and I try to direct guys and give them ideas. We've actually had, off the top of my head, I know 2 guys who left their departments, police and fire, and they replaced their income, and now they're working on replacing their wife's income within 2 years. So it's possible. It's very, very possible. And I want to see more guys get out of the mentality of button seat is worth $1, and into I can buy something to increase my net wealth and my and create passive income and long-term wealth for my family, for your family.
Yeah, trading money for time is not good.
Never get rich doing that.
Not good long term. Although that's what the fire department is, and it's not bad. It's a great job. I don't want to sound like I'm knocking it, but like you're a perfect example. Go blow your ankle out a second time and see if you can still be a fireman, right? Like, yeah. It's a very fragile role. Takes the wind out of your sails. Be taken away from.
It definitely takes the wind out of your sails. Yeah. But again, like it's just one of those things. Like, could it happen? Yeah, but most guys don't know what their pension looks like. Most guys don't know what their retirement amount looks like. Most guys don't know if they get injured, are they going to get taken care of? We are not the military. You are not getting disabled 100% and getting pay increases. Not in my department, at least. So educate yourself. Just spend time educating yourself and seeing what the best option for you is.
Before you go, Aaron, I want to ask, just because we're going to have listeners go, well, it's different out here. What are your shifts like at work? How often? How much are you there? What kind of mandates overtime do you get? All that stuff.
We're 24/72, so 1 on, 3 off, which is amazing. Our mandos depend on the year. I've had 5 or 6 fire chiefs in my department since I started. I think I've got like 5 different types of patches I've worn on my chest, just because everything always changes. So DC is a great department, and wherever you work, you can use to network and better yourself. And I've been very fortunate to work with a lot of great guys. But at the same token, a lot of the wind got taken out of my sails with my injury and them trying to kick me out of the department for $18,000 a year. Plus, I've had a couple of friends. I know you guys talk about mental health a lot. So actually, if you guys don't mind, I'd just do a little spiel.
Sure.
Mental health in the fire department is a big thing. It's very, very important. I had a line of duty death of my wagon driver a couple of years ago. He was cardiac. And then the next day after that, I had a friend kill himself. So we don't do enough to talk about like what we have going on with our own personal lives. Again, it goes back to us. We want to fix everybody else. But if you don't spend the time to fix yourself, then it's going to be harder for you to fix other people. So the IFF has a health and wellness center, which is about 20 minutes from me in Upper Marlboro. And they do a lot of great stuff. So be willing to help out and talk about what you got going on. Testosterone, a lot of guys equate PTSD with what they have. A lot of times ends up being low testosterone. We hear the bells, the sirens go off, and our testosterone shoots up, our adrenaline shoots up, our cortisol jumps up, and it makes it hard for our body to produce testosterone as we get older. And testosterone, low testosterone mirrors the same things as PTSD, whether it be anxiety, depression, ED, sleeplessness, low energy, fog, all that stuff. So anybody listening, get your T levels checked, especially as you get older. Once you hit 40, life changes for your body. And if you are having reoccurring issues, reach out to get help. There's lots of help out there. And there's a lot of guys going through it too.
Yeah, good advice for sure. That's a big topic of what we normally talk about.
I was listening yesterday. This is the same thing. I was like, these guys got some good content here.
We want to start. We got like 3 areas. One is firefighter mental health. The other area is taking care of the families and the kids of firefighters. And then the third area is leveling firemen up with their financial lives.
Yep.
is kind of what we're trying to focus on as our podcast develops, and we kind of figure out what our message is. Those are kind of the three areas we want to focus on. But we're excited because you clearly have expertise on the financial side. But yeah, we could have gone down any one of those paths, I'm sure. Well, Aaron, I think we probably need to wrap it up, but it's been awesome having you on. I hope our listeners go join your Facebook group. We'll put links to it down below.
I'm glad I was able to put a face to the name. I've been part of that Facebook group for, I don't know, probably close to 6 months now. And it's funny because a lot of times you'll just post like one little snippet of a deal you're working on, and I'll go down a rabbit hole going, oh, what's that about? So anyway, I appreciate your time. It's been cool. And I appreciate the final shout out you had there at the end. So yeah, I mean, this will spark a lot more conversation at the stations too, which is what we're looking for.
Good. If you want to reach out to me, just some friend request on Facebook, join the group. And if you have questions, I'll do what I can to help. Before we start the podcast, I was telling the guys that my office is about to be turned into a nursery, so my life's going to change here in about 3 months. My office is getting moved to the basement, and I probably am too at some point. So I'll do whatever I can to help.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Thanks for coming,
guys.
on.
I appreciate you having me.
All right, that was a lot of great info. A lot of info. Aaron was talking about a lot of different strategies, and kind of had my head spinning a little bit there, but yeah, interesting to see his take. And I thought it was interesting that what kind of prompted him to get serious about investing was when he had a fairly serious injury, which made him contemplate, what is my future? They're talking about retiring me. I need to figure this out, kind of a thing, which was bad to go through that experience, but we can all learn from that and set ourselves up to where that's not going to be as big of an issue. What'd you think?
It was great. There was a captain that used to work for Ventura City that once told me to do something. Doesn't matter what you do, just do something. Take some action. You remember who that was? Yeah, it was you. So 2 things I really liked about Aaron, his East Coast swagger. I caught some of that, not as much as maybe straight from New Jersey or New York, but I love the East Coast attitude. I've always been about it. And then FITFO. I'm using that from now on for sure.
Yeah.
That was a great expression. I'll be using that.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was like a term at their fire department. It sounds like he's been using it his whole life, but that was funny. It is funny how we're all the same fire service, but the East Coast, and I wanted to get into how it kept talking about blue collar this, blue collar that, and I think it's a little different on the East Coast, like the perception of what a firefighter is versus the perception of a firefighter on the West Coast. But we obviously didn't get into it, but he did keep referencing blue collar quite a bit.
Yeah, it's important for those guys to be seen as a working class, and I think in California we really make it important to talk about how we're professional firefighters out here, and we kind of try to hold the highest standard, and it's just different. But it's cool to hear all different fire departments and what their inspiration is and what they're about and the differences. And I liked getting into his specific department, what they look like, their schedule and their call volume, and all that stuff's fun too.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks as always, Jason, and until the next time.
Sounds good.